This is AUGforums.com Real Talk. First, thank you to our sponsors, APS Payments, Kenzium, and Velixo. You can learn more about how our sponsors work with Acumatica by going to augforums.com/sponsors. My name is Tim Rodman, and I'm coming to you live on Tuesday, September 1st, 2020. This is episode number 23, Exploring Becoming an Acumatica VAR with Sandra Vallejo. And Sandra, before I turn it over to you to introduce yourself, I just want to mention this. Today's format's a new format or a new interview style. In the past, we've had some customer interviews, some other interviews of people who have been around the Acumatica ecosystem. Sandra is actually considering becoming a VAR, and I thought it'd be really interesting to hear her background and then turn it over to her to ask as many questions as she can think of from the perspective of someone considering becoming an Acumatica VAR. So with that background, Sandra, I'll let you go ahead and introduce yourself.
Good afternoon, and thank you for having me. As you say, my name is Sandra Vallejo. I'm a CPA, and I'm the founder of Pdriven, a cloud-based project-based organization. I've been project-driven organizations for over 20 years now. And prior to starting my own firm, I used to work with other software, like some of those Deltek, Vision, and also from Microsoft and Dynamics Suite. So now my intention is to become a VAR for Acumatica, and I'm exploring that opportunity.
Awesome. I'm curious on the Dynamics. Was it SL or was it GP? Which Dynamics product did you work with?
It was called Navision. They shortened that for NAV or NAV.
Got it. Okay. Interesting. And so you spent some time, I think you were telling me you spent before what you're currently doing now, you were on the corporate side working with mid-sized businesses, and now is it mostly QuickBooks and zero customers, or what are you working on currently?
Mostly QuickBooks, and right now I'm working with small businesses, and I work with both with the online and the desktop version.
Okay. Awesome. Then I might be remembering incorrectly on this, but were you also doing something with financial planning and analysis tools?
Not that much anymore. I work basically with those two. And what we're doing now is we are moving away from QuickBooks because of the so many changes coming up to QuickBooks, and actually having Intuit competing with the Pro Advisors. So we are taking our firm in a different direction. And that's why we are looking into Acumatica to see if this is the right platform to service our customer base.
Ah, interesting. Yeah, I was wondering if it was an addition to the portfolio or more of like a replacement. Sounds like it's more of a replacement in that you're not looking to continue on with QuickBooks. You're looking to replace that with Acumatica.
You are exactly correct. It's not going to happen overnight, but in the long term, it's going to be a replacement.
Okay, interesting. Well, I'll turn it over to you I think you've got a great perspective, probably more valuable than you think it is, of someone who's looking from the outside in at the Acumatica ecosystem. Go ahead and fire away. I'm sure you've got just a list of things. I'll do my best. I'm not going to call this a question and answer. I'll call this a question and response. I'll do my best, take a crack at things, and anyone else listening to this, maybe they might want to reach out and fill in some gaps on my responses, but I'll let you go ahead with questions.
Okay, perfect. One of the questions that I have for you and for the Acumatica groups out there is anybody out there that can share with me their experience? You mentioned that you come yourself from a VAR business. What was your experience coming on board with Acumatica, and what kind of support do you get or your firm gets when you are new to Acumatica?
Good question. Probably someone else listening will be better positioned to respond to that. My personal background, I started working with the product really as a hobby, for a lack of a better word, back in 2012. I got my hands on a copy of it. I was working with a Sage product called Mass 500, and it was one of those dying or dead products. I was looking for a new product, started working for Acumatica Corporate, then I moved into a VAR. So I didn't really get that experience of being a brand new VAR and seeing what kind of support you get. I think the best I can respond from what I've heard from others is that you have your partner account manager who will get assigned to you, and they'll be your main contact for Acumatica. Things like just getting up to speed on what education courses you need to take on Acumatica University, and also things like working out how the sales and demo process works and how you can increase your leads, either getting them from Acumatica or just working with their recommended marketing practices. Your partner account manager will manage that process. And then once you get clients and you've got the support side, you do have the Acumatica support team that you can cases with. And here's where me being on the implementation side, I'm not sure if this is current, but I'm pretty sure that's just part of your package of being a VAR, that those support plans or the support cases are free to you to open as many as you'd like from that standpoint. But I think you're probably talking more just from the general relationship. Is that right?
That is correct. But I have also a question more specific to you, because you come from the Acumatica family and now you are on the other side. You work for a VAR. What has been your experience in that transition?
Yeah, I think when I was at Acumatica, I was on a team that was involved with implementations. And so the main difference for me personally was we were more like involved in implementations that maybe a VAR wanted assistance on, And this was a few years ago, so there were more VARs needing that. I don't know the current policy. There was, at least for a little bit, that for your first implementation or two, you were actually required to use that implementation team just to make sure you had a good experience on those first couple. And so the main difference for me personally was moving from one additional layer removed from the client to being more right in front of the client and walking through all the steps rather than only where there was significant issues.
Okay. And also, tell me a little bit about Acumatica from your perspective, where the company is today, where the company is going. I know it's in growth mode, but can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I think there's definite question marks. Just like with any ERP system, where are they going, right? And especially as us VARs in the channel, it's always something we want to know the latest on because it has a huge impact on your business, right? I think if you look at Acumatica started around 2008, and so if I just walk through it chronologically from my standpoint, they started in 2008, and because they built from scratch on modern technology, it took them a while to really have a viable product, right? Something that you could really plug in consistently into businesses. So what year they really hit their stride, I think you could debate that. I would say maybe around 2015 or 2016. And right around then is when John Roskell came on board, who's the current CEO. And he really took them from that startup mode to that hit the gas pedal type of mode. And he actually used to be, I believe his position was actually the worldwide partner account director. I don't know what the official title was, but at Microsoft, which has a very large partner channel, right? So he really came with a heavy duty leadership, strategic type of a thinking to Acumatica, and really, in my opinion, is the main one to hit the gas pedal from a business standpoint. But they had to get the product in a good position first. So from 2008 to, let's say, around 2015, you had that. And then it's really just the last 4 to 5 years that they've really accelerated. And they've been adding now over 1,000 customers a year. And they're sitting at, I think the last I checked, it was just shy of 6,000 customers. So if you think about that, more than half your customers have come just in the last few years. It's really recently that they've really hit their pace. And just last summer, they got acquired actually by a Swedish equity group. And it's the same equity group that owns another ERP product called IFS, which competes more in the SAP space. So the big question there is, IFS has talked a lot about going public. And the big question I have is that Swedish equity group, which now owns Acumatica, would they roll the two together so they go public together? Or would they keep that? Once you're in the hands of an equity group, all bets are off, right? It's all a money game. So we'll see what happens there. But that was just last summer that they got acquired.
Okay. And one more question I have for you, especially because your background with Acumatica, I wanted to hear from your perspective about the Acumatica Open University.
The Open University has, I'm not completely clear on this myself, what stuff the Open University has versus, let's call it the closed university, the one that only partners and customers have access to. I think for the most part, it's the same content. You might have a few extra courses on the one that's not on the Open University, but I'd say the content is pretty good as far, especially from a VAR standpoint. Especially from a VAR standpoint. Someone who really wants to get in and understand the details of every setting, and who's going to be comfortable setting up a brand new demo environment and going through all the prep required to then go through the exercises in the course. I think from a VAR standpoint, you'll have a good experience there. I think where it still needs some maturing is on the customer side. Someone who doesn't want to configure a brand new environment, someone who just wants to learn how to use their own environment better. They have pushed out more video content that's mostly recordings of webinars, and I think that's probably most useful to customers, so they don't have to go through the whole process of configuring a demo environment. But from your standpoint, as someone looking to become a VAR, I think you're going to find there's quite a bit of content. It's mostly boils down to, which for most courses are a couple hundred pages long. There's a lot in there. So it's time consuming, just like it is learning any new ERP system, but that has matured a lot. If you were to go back 5 years ago, it was a lot more difficult to onboard from an education standpoint. I think they've done a good job, especially in the last few years, to push more courses out there.
Okay. And last but not least, for somebody like myself who wants to hit the ground running, and I am completely new to Acumatica, what kind of recommendations you have so that we can be successful from the get-going?
So I think really from a VAR standpoint, your most important thing is to make some sales, right? And I think that a lot of that's going to come down to your marketing team working together with your marketing team, working together with your partner account manager to get Acumatica visible on your website. And that area is somewhat mysterious to me, how I've heard one VAR describe it as leads appear out of the ether. You know, it's a somewhat mysterious process how that happens in any business, right? I think that's really your first step. And I don't know if that's really your question. Are you talking more about once you get that first client, how comfortable will you be implementing it, or
actually,
is it more
from both. You already answered one,
Okay.
but also, yeah, both of them are fair questions.
So I think really your partner account manager would be your point person for getting the engine running to get the leads going, and then your existing client base, how you're going to market that. I know they have a lot of packaged marketing content available for you and learn events, things like that. Because I haven't been through that process, I can't speak to it from the first person, but just being a very vibrant, growing community, from what I've heard, is VARs are very happy with the extent to which Acumatica assists them in that process. And there's just a lot of energy and a lot of excitement and just a lot of ideas for how to get you moving.
Okay. Now, I said I have already asked you the last question, but I have another one.
Fire away. No, keep them coming.
Because I'm not part of the Acumatica community yet. Is there any way that I can participate in any of the community gatherings or programs?
Yeah, I think the first one, I'll send you a link to this if you don't have it already. For sure, the virtual launch of 2020 R2. I don't know, have you seen that yet?
Not yet.
I'm looking for it myself. Let's see. Give me a second. I am checking to see when the date was. It's in a couple weeks. It's September 16th. I'll send you a link to this. Anyone can register for it. And because of COVID, normally what they've done the past few years is in the fall. Well, let me step back a minute. From a community standpoint, in-person events, now COVID, of course, is throwing a wrench into all that, right? But if we look at the last few years, the two key events have been, one at the end of January, like the last few days of January, first few days of February, is when the Acumatica Summit takes place.
Okay.
That's the big event for the year. And that event has grown significantly just the last few years. And watching that, because I've been to those the last few years, that to me is really where you can see how fast Acumatica is growing. Everything from just the size of the event in terms of total number of people to how well run the event is, how big the stage is, all that kind of stuff. You go back 4 years ago, it was very different than it is now. You can just see the growth substantially there. That's the big event. Now, fortunately, because of COVID, they've pushed that, I think, into the spring, and then it's still a question mark with every event right now.
Okay.
But what they do at that event, because Acumatica is so product focused, and they really put a lot of investment in their product. I don't know if this is still the case since they got acquired, but I believe the number that John Roscoe used to say was they actually spend around 72% of their spend is on product related positions, which is really the reverse of what most ERP companies do. Most of them are spending 80% just on marketing and sales, and then less than 20% of their spend is actually on developing the product, right? Acumatica is the reverse. So because of that engineering product nature of the company, they come out with a ton of new features every new version, and they highlight those in their events. So the summit is when they release their R1 release. So we had 2020, just like Dynamics used to name their products. It's Acumatica 2020 R1. You'll see a bunch of demoed features at the summit at the end of January. Then in September, they would go around the U.S. to multiple cities and do road shows for their R2 release, 2020 R2. So now in a couple of weeks, that'll be a virtual event. So I definitely recommend attending that. I'll also include, I'll send you some links for how you can watch previous summits and get an idea of what's going on there.
Sounds great.
I think those two events are your best bet for getting a taste of the community. Of course, downside with COVID, we don't have the in-person events, but there is also I believe you're in Atlanta, was that right?
Florida.
There is a local Acumatica user group in Atlanta run by a VAR there. And I don't know their current situation if they're doing virtual events, but I will also send you a link that you can look into to find out more about that.
Great.
Can look into to find out more about that.
Great.
So yeah, I think, you know, the downside is because of COVID, it's harder to get together with people. I think the upside is it's either easier to jump onto virtual events because there's more of them, right?
That's true.
I'm trying to think. There is one other thing. There's also a community called Acuconnect. I'm just listing down some things to send you. And I think what I'll do, Sandra, is I'll include them as links on this podcast episode so you can go check them out.
Okay, great.
Now, one thing I was curious about, your current client base is mostly QuickBooks and Xero clients. I was curious, are you getting a lot of requests from clients that they're outgrown QuickBooks and are looking to go another direction?
In reality, yes, I have clients that have outgrown QuickBooks. Many times it's actually us, the accountants, who come back to them and tell them, you know, that they already reached the point in which they should be looking to a different solution. So that's mostly the case. And I work mostly with the ERP, which is more robust than their online product. So with the ERP, they are pretty much more at a place that if and when they outgrow it, they are ready to move to a different platform. So that's what I'm seeing right now. And another side is, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm curious, in your experience, what ballpark annual revenue? I usually see it around the 10 to 15, maybe the 10 to 20 range. When companies get into that range of annual revenue, they start feeling the pain of QuickBooks. In your experience, is that about right, or do you see something else?
For some industries, it is. But for some other industries, they feel that pain before they reach that volume, especially when they are transaction heavy. You can see that a little bit earlier, but you are correct. It's somewhere between the 10 and the 15.
And then because you've got experience with mid-market products, you know that an ERP product is not QuickBooks. I think I'm also curious in your experience. For me, the biggest one, I think that accountants mainly that are running on QuickBooks, that the biggest thing that surprises them when they've never worked with a mid-market product is the audit trail that you can't think 5 months ago. And for a bookkeeper type, that's really painful for them because they like to be able to just quickly fix something. But of course, for a more controller thinking type of person, they actually many times are looking for that functionality where they don't want someone to be able to change a posted transaction, right?
That is correct.
But I think that you found the same thing.
Oh, definitely. The audit trail, the inability to alter transactions, which to me is a great thing. And it was a challenge when I started working with QuickBooks, how loose it is in which you can change even a check that you produce a day and you print it and mail it, you can go back and alter the payee and all that. Also in QuickBooks, you don't have double dates. What I mean by that is for a document, you had the date that the document was created and you had the date that you need to post the document. You don't have that in QuickBooks, and you had the date that you need to post the document. You don't have that in QuickBooks. So moving back to mid-market is a great plus for me.
So you're closing the books in QuickBooks it's not completely locked down. A number could change on you in a prior period if you're not careful.
Yes, they can change all the time. You can change it anytime.
I see.
Closing the books doesn't really mean the same as in a mid-market product. is completely different. You can close it. It's like a soft close, but you can go back and change it. So that's a challenge.
They're great points, I think, for anyone who's in the QuickBooks space looking to move up, because I think there's two challenges, right? One is that your current client base, except for the ones that are asking for a larger product, many of them might be just happy on QuickBooks, right? And one thing I've seen some people, in my opinion, make the mistake on is they try to just swap out Acumatica for QuickBooks. To me, that's not something you want to do. I don't think Acumatica plays well in the small, really small business, because QuickBooks is convenient. It's really user-friendly, right? And as much as Acumatica, they've won a lot of awards for being very usable, very user-friendly, it's still not QuickBooks. If you compare them to other mid-market products, very user-friendly. But compared to QuickBooks, it's hard to beat that user interface, right? But then there's the downsides as well.
It is not QuickBooks, and it needs not to be QuickBooks, because with the perception that is user-friendly, then there comes trouble as well. Because I find all the time clients that they want to do everything just because the system allows them to do it, and it looks like they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, and the kind of challenges, the kind of issues that they create is enormous, just because they think they know what they're doing, and the system leads them to believe, that you don't have to be a trained accountant or a bookkeeper to use it, and you just go along using it, and the web or the mess that is created is unbelievable. So a mid-market product does not have to be QuickBooks. Sometimes it's good for you to feel that it's not that easy to use, because it's going to be the less that you're going to get in trouble.
No, that's a good point. I like that. That's a very good point. I'm curious also on your being project focused, or businesses that are project focused. Just for the sake, I think this is a great conversation for anyone who's on QuickBooks currently looking at Acumatica, right? And I'm curious, when you're on QuickBooks and you're dealing with projects or funds in the nonprofit space, how do you handle that in QuickBooks? And then where do you hit the limitations of what QuickBooks is able to do from a project accounting standpoint?
There are many limitations. QuickBooks, when it comes to project management, is very limited. Also, looking at the financials of projects is very limited. For myself, coming from a mid-sized software, which was Deltek Vision, the difference is enormous. You don't have the ability to look at projects, in the mid-market arena. You cannot see the productivity. The limitations are many, like I said before. So that is something that I am looking forward to moving to a larger, more robust platform, is to gain more insight into the project cycle, which I don't have right now.
I see. So in QuickBooks, is it more that you're trying to add project fields into the general ledger rather than having a true project submodule? Would that be a good way of looking at it?
That's a great way of explaining that. You just add
using a class or something else, some other segment to your TL account structure, but it's really the general ledger that you're doing it in.
That is correct. You don't have a product. You don't have a product module. So that's exactly the way that you explain it. The way that you explain it.
That makes sense. Yeah.
It's pretty much
one of the things. Sorry, what was that? Go ahead.
I said that it's pretty much a workaround.
I see. Maybe with spreadsheets or some outside system that you reconcile to QuickBooks.
If you want to take your information to a different level, then you use something like Excel to complement what you are missing in QuickBooks.
I know early on in Acumatica's life cycle, the one thing that brought, I think, a lot of project-focused VARs on board was the fact that a number of the original Acumatica people, including the CTO who created the product, and there was actually three original founders. One of them, the CTO, Mike C., who created the product. Second one was John Howell, who was an executive for Solomon Software that became Dynamics SL. Both of them had that Solomon background. And because of that, and Solomon being very, very good at projects, I think in the early days that made a lot of people optimistic about Acumatica's ability to do projects. And
great.
from what I've heard, people who compare the two, it's not quite Solomon, not quite as sophisticated as that, but it's pretty good. And I think that's what allowed them. I don't know if you've seen their various editions, but Acumatica has what they call a construction edition, which is really mostly the existing project functionality. They just added in some construction specific things like an AIA report and other of those specific construction industry things. But the project accounting nature and the projects module, the ability to do the budget tracking, the separate project ledger. Now they've got cost codes in there in addition to what they call tasks. That, from what I've heard, people comparing it to other project systems, it was well done. And you mentioned Deltek. Another thing you might look into on the project side, there's actually an Acumatica Oem. Okay. So one thing Acumatica does that I think is fairly unique is that they've gone into other countries, like when they go into Australia or Germany, they don't sell Acumatica. They actually partnered with, in Australia, it's a company called MYOB, and they make what's sort of like the QuickBooks of Australia.
Yeah.
And then there's
a little bit, mind your own business, yes.
Then there's a company in Germany called Lexware, similar kind of a thing. They've got like the QuickBooks of Germany. Well, Acumatica partnered with both of those companies and several others in other countries to allow them to white label Acumatica as their own product, but it's really Acumatica under the hood. So you've got those OEMs, and then you've also got, here in the United States, a company called Jamis, Jamis, which you might have come across in the Deltek space. They make a specific government contracting solution. So they actually created their own projects module. They don't use the Acumatica projects module, but they built it in Acumatica as an OEM. So the rest of it, the distribution side, the general ledger side, is, for the most part, as I understand it at least, regular Acumatica. So Jamis, John, if it would make more sense, if you're in the government contracting project side of things, you might actually look into becoming a Jamis partner rather than an Acumatica partner.
Okay. I'll take a look at it.
And then I'll mention one other, this is an add-on product. They're actually one of our sponsors on this podcast, but the product's called Velixo. And what they do is they sit in Excel. So it's an Excel add-on that knows how to talk directly to Acumatica and allows you to report on both general ledger data and the project ledger data. So if you've got a company that likes working in Excel, they just don't like manually exporting data to Excel, neither do I. Velixo is a nice add-on that you might even bundle in with all of your standard estimates to prospects. I find a lot of partners now are doing that. They find it's a very popular. Accountants who like living in Excel, and it works really well with the Acumatica product. That's all they work with. And their founder, Gabriel, actually used to work at Acumatica. And so he knows the product very well and just has a really good Excel add-on for project reporting, general ledger reporting. They actually even just added some functions for reporting on any data that you want in the system. You have to create some custom queries for that, but they do have that additional flexibility. So there's another thing to put on your list, Velixo, something to, especially if you could come on as an Acumatica VAR, it might be a product you just kind of include in what you show people as almost like it's part of Acumatica.
Okay, sounds great.
Well, thanks for coming on. I know we hadn't even talked until a few minutes before we hit record, but I thought it'd be interesting to hear your perspective as someone from considering becoming a VAR and learning a little bit more about the QuickBooks world that you're currently in.
So thank you for inviting me, and thank you for all the information you share with me. This is very useful, and I appreciate it greatly.
Absolutely. Thanks for coming on. Appreciate the time.
My pleasure.
All right. Well, that's it for now. We'll catch